It's time for the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, a podcast so good it doesn't need a name. So without any further ado, here's your host, JD. Take it away, Johnny.
Hello my friends, and welcome to episode 60 of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, recorded on December 7th, 2014. I'm your host, JD, aka Gaddatig, and in today's episode, I'm back in the SWTOR groove. You may have noticed, and you probably have, that I've been gone for a couple weeks. I did take another hiatus from the game. I apologize for not filling you in on a recorded episode, even though I was kind of talking about it on Twitter for a little while. I know this is twice in the past couple months that I've done such a thing, but I think now that the expansion's out, we'll be back to regularly scheduled podcasts, and I'll be more inclined to tell you what's going on. But if you're not already, follow me at GTeague on Twitter, and you'll get all sorts of news updates when we get towards the holidays. There will be a couple weeks where I won't be able to release an episode, but let's not talk about that right now. Let's talk about the big 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is Shadow of Revan. Shadow of Revan was released on Tuesday, and I've had a chance to play through the Republic storyline on one character. I've played a heroic, I've done the new flashpoints in tactical mode, and I will tell you what I think. So, with all that being said, let's force sleep right in.
Red 2, I've got a topic coming in hot requesting clearance to engage. Lock S-foils and attack positions, you are cleared to discuss.
I'm going to talk about my experiences with Shadow of Revan thus far. It's been out for a little under a week, and I've had a little less time than I would have liked to have played Shadow of Revan. But I've gotten through the storyline, like I said, and I've gotten through the 2 tactical flashpoints as well as the final boss. Even though it bugged out the first time, I was able to get it working somehow the second time. So I've done that. I'm not going to go into spoilers, or at least I'm going to try to avoid spoilers, but I'm going to talk about just the mechanics and some general thoughts in this section. I will talk about the story more in the second section, which might go into some spoiler territory. I'm going to try and keep it generic to things you already know, but generally how I feel about the mechanics, how it's working, how the flow goes, things like that. I'm only going to go into things that you'd be able to find by going on the subreddit or on the website just straight out. So if you're really sensitive and don't want to hear anything and you haven't gone to the website or the subreddit or anything, then you might want to turn this episode off, I guess. But if you are sensitive to story spoilers and things like that, then maybe skip over the next section. I'll try and comment and mark out where I'm going to talk about and delve into some spoilers. Alright, with all the disclaimers out of the way, let's talk about Shadow of Revan. Going into Shadow of Revan, I was cautiously optimistic. I think that they were doing a lot of good things to change how the game works mechanically. I really like the discipline system. I think it's a good idea in theory. I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to be in practice, even though we've seen all the dev streams. Let's be honest, you know that things change from the PTS to when it goes into live, and who knew what was going to happen once Shadow of Revan was actually released to the public. So I thought disciplines were a good change, but overall I thought that the way that BioWare was talking about the expansion and everything they've gone into, it seemed like this was a mechanical setup expansion, where they're going to set the stage so that they can iterate quicker, faster, more rapidly, do more interesting things going forward. The discipline system would let them balance more quickly and hopefully put in more PvE content because everything was more balanced and they can test things more effectively. They continued to talk about new testing tools that they had and new metrics that they were going to use in order to test their content. So that was something that excited me. The ability for them to change classes and class balance for PvP more quickly is a great change. I know that's been a huge problem in the PvP community for a long time. So hopefully with the discipline system they'll be able to do that. But on top of the discipline system and more of the same old stuff, more operations, no new PvP Warzone and no new PvE arena, no new PvP really at all, except for the changes to discipline. So we were getting the story content, which I knew would be solid. I was excited to see where they took the story, because obviously story is BioWare's great selling point, and SWTOR's great selling point is its in-depth story. So I was pretty sure that would be awesome. But with that and the discipline system, that's all we really knew about. I wasn't sure if it would be a light on content expansion, if it wouldn't be enough to hold people's interests. So when it was released on Tuesday, I didn't really know what to expect. I got in, I started my crew skills, which I think let's start here. The crew skills, I don't think they did anything interesting at all. Actually, they dumbed down the crew skills, really. Not really dumbed it down, but they more flatlined all the crew skills. So they really nerfed biochem hard. They made the stims last longer, and they popped like a jillion per one stim on a crit. So even without a crit, you get more. I think you get 6 or 4. You get more than you used to when you craft stims and the med packs. Stims, med packs, and adrenals. You get more per one usage of those. So the market's not going to be as great on those. I'm sure the market on augments and augment kits will probably be around the same because they didn't really do much to change that. It's still, you need 10 of the augmentation doodad things you get from REing. The thing about REing is they changed every single one of the crew skills to have a 2-2-2 split on some item or all items. I'm not sure if it's all items, but I'm pretty sure from everything I've looked at, all the greens at level 60 or whatever the max level, 500 or 450, I forget what it is, but the max level on crew skills, they all have something that's the 2 of the white item and then 2 compounds and 2 metals or 2 crystals and 2 artifacts, whatever it is per that crew skill. They all have it, unlike just Cybertech having it on that one single droid part. So overall, I think they've made it easier for players to compete in the crew skill game. Obviously, you're still going to have to work and put in that effort to level up all your crew skills and run all those missions and all those different characters, so that's still going to be rewarded. But it's definitely going to be a lot more of a buyer's market once everyone gets up to the max level and runs all those crew skills, because they have reduced the barrier to entry to create a lot of these items. So I don't know if that's a good change or a bad change. I personally like playing the GTN, that's how I made a lot of my money, so maybe it's a bad change for me, but I'm also playing a lot less frequently right now. I've become a filthy casual, if you will, so maybe this is a good change for me. I don't know, we'll have to see how it goes. Maybe they'll change things going forward as well. I have a feeling they will buff biochem a little bit, because it seems like they've been nerfed really hard, and maybe they deserve a little bit more of a push, but we'll see how Bioware decides to handle that. And I said this a while ago, I thought Galactic Conquest had fundamentally changed crafting, but they really haven't implemented anything new and special with that since Galactic Conquests were first added in the game, and since Galactic Conquests have kind of died down a little bit. Maybe they'll start kicking back up with the expansion, but I really don't see that happening. I don't see players more excited to do Galactic Conquest right now, but maybe that's because they're leveling. So we'll have to see. Give it 2 weeks, give it a month, and we'll see how Galactic Conquests are going there to see how that affects crew skills as well, because that's an important part of crew skills, being able to give value to those lower level crafting mats. That's an important part to the ecosystem that I think they put in there, and that's why I liked it so much. But since those have kind of died down, the prices have died down on those. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks. Another small but welcome change is the addition of mission terminals to your starship, and the way that terminals are handled in general, and the way quests are handled in general. They've changed their philosophy in the way they do voiceover. Not every quest giver has to have a full conversation with you. They don't need a voice actor. They don't have to have a cutscene for every single little mini quest in there. And that's not just saying daily quests. That could be normal, regular side quests that you would see on a planet. Now they have little canned dialogue sequences, so if you walk up to a quest giver on Rishi, for example, and it's a side quest giver, he may say in-game, without going to a cutscene, we're having trouble with the smugglers around here, can you go do this for me? And it pops up with a quest, and then you accept the quest. There's some quest text there, but you basically get the story of the quest from those 2 little canned pieces of dialogue, and then when you return to him, your character, him or her, whoever the quest giver is, will have another canned little dialogue sequence. Your character might say something, this mission is done, and then the other person will say, oh, thank you very much, and that'll be the end of that. I think that's a good way of doing it. I think that spacebarring has definitely become the norm in a lot of content in this game, and I think that if you make your main quests, your character quests, feel special and feel different from the other quests, that'll kind of incentivize and better better make it so players really want to engage with that story. They don't feel like this is the 15,000th quest that I'm getting today. I've been in cutscenes more than I've been playing the game. I'm not leveling as fast as I feel like I should. So you remove and you cut back on some of the fat there and just leave the really good meat of the story to have cutscene and voiceover. And then they could also put a lot more work in the animation of those cutscenes. People have remarked, and I've noticed it too, they've gotten a lot better at staging the cutscenes. It's not as much of shot, reverse shot anymore. It's more cinematic. The camera pans in, the camera will swing out, and it'll do all sorts of camera tricks to make it look cool, make the cutscenes look awesome. And I think they've done a good job there. They've focused their resources on what really matters, because those side quests, most people don't really care about the story of those anyway, so why bother adding anything? I like that they've added some VO to it, that you still do get that little story description. You don't have to read the quest text to really understand what they want and what the person needs you to do, but it doesn't take you out of the gameplay for an extended period of time and make you make some ridiculous and unnecessary dialogue choices that wait there. There's no reason to do any of that, so cut that out, and they have, and that's a good change. And then they've also added the mission terminals, which now have a much slicker interface. It's a lot easier to see which quests on a mission terminal that you want to accept, which ones you don't care about. It'll pop up with the description, what you need to do, and the rewards all in one single slick pane, and then you can select all the different missions that they have there and read everything that the terminal has for you. It's great, and I really like that. I also like that they've done it on your player ships, so now, I don't know if you're able to do this from the Keb, but you can definitely do it for at least Ilum and for the new missions. And Oricon as well, I believe. I think I saw Oricon, the quest line there, on my mission terminal. But it allows you to skip through all the different class story quests or big story mainline quests that you could get on your ship. I think this might help with players who had the unfortunate situation where they got to level 58 and said, oh hey, there's a new quest on my ship, what is this? And then they had the whole ending of their story spoiled. So that's a good change. It's a very small, minor thing, but I like it. In general, let's talk a little bit more generally about the flow of questing. I think that Rishi is a excellent quest line. I'm not going to talk about story here, I'm just going to talk about how the quests flow. I like that on Rishi, they really slowly ease you into the story of what's going on in Rishi. You don't really know what's going on, there's not a lot of combat, there is a lot of getting immersed in the world, a lot of discussions, a lot of talking, a lot of learning about the characters of Rishi, and I like that a lot. I think they did a good job there, which is funny because I really disliked the Consular story because it was all talking. You can do, I think from level 10, or maybe 15, I think from Taris all the way up to Balmora? I think you can do that entire sequence in there, killing like 3 characters, and that's it. You don't have to kill anything else for the story quest line. And I think the reason that I dislike that so much is that you're traveling so far just to do these small conversations, whereas Rishi, you're traveling a lot less, everything is there, you're more immersed in the world, it feels better than I am the traveling messenger, I'm gonna go talk to this guy, and this guy, and this guy, on all these different planets and do a whole lot of walking. I think that really detracts from the Consular storyline for me, and what really made me like the storyline on Rishi. Now, this kind of all goes to hell when you get to Yavin, which I think is incredibly rushed and doesn't feel cohesive at all. I really dislike the Yavin story. It just feels like you're going too fast, you get to a very big story beat, and all of a sudden it's like, and do these daily quests, and then we're done, and that's it. And it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it doesn't give it time to build to what's happening. I don't think they should have done like a WoW style where you have to do X amount of dailies and then you can go do this epic storyline, the end to this epic storyline like they did in, I believe it was the Firelands had something like that in WoW way back when. But I dislike that, but I also dislike this where it's just like, and do these quests and you're done. The daily quests are like kill 10 of boars and get 5 bear asses or whatever. None of that is interesting. I think they did a poor job of Yavin, and it feels like to me, which is kind of sad to say, that they just didn't have enough time to get Yavin up to the point where it should have been. Rishi, I thought, was a fully fledged planet. It really felt like a special planet, a different planet It feels like they really put the time and effort into creating a very awesome and neat self-contained Star Wars story within Rishi. But then we go over to Yavin, and too fast. It feels small. It doesn't look great. I mean, it looks great in theory, and that's the sad part about it. I think they've done a perfect job realizing exactly how Yavin should look, but in the hero engine, some things just look so bad. Like the foliage. The foliage, it kind of looks like a oil painting with bad filters over it. Like I said, it looks like they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and if they could have done it the right way, it would have looked amazing, but fire and foliage are things that BioWare should try and stay away from because their engine doesn't make it look good. When we move on to the second segment, I'll talk a little bit more about the story so I can go a little bit more in depth on what I mean exactly by the half-bakedness of Yavin and why I liked Rishi so much. So if you want to hear more about that, just wait until the second segment and we'll finish up here for now, and we will talk about the hard mode flashpoints. So far, I've done a single hard mode flashpoint, and if all the hard modes are like this one, I'm not going to be super happy about them. The hard mode flashpoints are upgraded versions of the Forged Alliance's story into hard mode. I did Rakata Prime. On Rakata Prime, I thought the first boss was decent. It was the Rancor guy, and I think the fire needs to hit twice as hard in that fight. I'll just say that. But other than that, I think that fight is okay. The second fight is really boring and pretty much unchanged. Did a poor job there. And then the final fight, I think, maybe this is minor spoiler territory here, but I assume that all of you have probably done the Forged Alliance's storyline, at least the flashpoints. But in the last boss, when you're fighting both Arcus and Derek, I think they're so close to a great boss fight there, it's just missing one small mechanic. Like Derek, he has both a pull and a push, which is great, because I think they do a good job with ballistics in this game. I like how ballistics work, I like how they feel, so I think they can be used really well in a good fight mechanic. Now, the other guy, Arcus, he has the arcing ability he puts on two players that they can't stand near each other, but I feel like they need one more ability for him, some kind of maybe condensing darkness or something like that that comes in from the outside and forces players to come together and forces players to risk reward coming together and splitting up. If they had done that on top of Derek's pushing you and pulling you and playing around with where you can stand, and then the player is having to split up and come together, I think that would be a great boss fight and would have really improved the whole instance for me. The instance in general, it still looks great. It's still one of the best looking flashpoints I believe in the game. It's still a little long. It's not the longest in the world. It's not as long as Tython or Korriban, but it doesn't feel as tight. It feels like there's some fat there that could have been cut. And just a final note on what I've heard of the operations. I have not been in the operations yet, but I've heard story mode is pretty easy, but it's also pretty fun. And then I've heard the hard modes are actually really challenging people, and it seems like at this moment, it's very difficult, and players are going to basically have to go into hard modes with min-max gear from story mode in order to be able to complete content. I think at this moment only 3 of the bosses have been killed in the first hard mode, so I think that's a good sign. But it also comes with the caveat that a lot of things are bugged, and I guess I'll talk about bugs and spoilers in the next segment, because this one's going kind of long. But the stats right now are really bugged to hell. Accuracy, there's something wrong with the accuracy calculation, because players have to basically run accuracy in every single enhancement to hit the accuracy cap, and right now the accuracy cap is an important thing for all DPS to hit, so we have a problem there. They've also done some interesting changes, and these are all, I spoke to someone I trust within the hard mode community, who's on a very good guild on my server, and he was saying that a lot of the bosses are AoE fights where there's lots of ads to be DPSing down, and some of the changes they've made to certain classes have made that kind of a joke. Certain classes are doing incredible amounts of DPS in these fights because of the buffs to AoE, which is interesting because BioWare has long since been on the track of nerfing AoE down. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And I expect certain nerfs and certain fixes to be coming in the future, and maybe that will change how difficult the fights are for players. Like I said, this segment is running very long. I will talk about some bugginess and some problems in the second segment, as well as my thoughts on the story and how I would have improved it. Stick around. Now let's talk about a topic that's always on everybody's mind, and that is bugs. SWTOR has a long history of very public and very long-standing bugs in their game. And Shadows of Revan is no exception. I'll talk about a few of them here. Probably the scariest right now for me is the ability delay that is consistently happening on planets. I think it has something to do with population because it tends to happen more during prime time. But there have been server crashes, there have been server restarts, and there have been instances of long ability delay, abilities not firing, cooldowns still going off, even though abilities haven't happened yet. There have been lots of problems in that area, and with this only being early access, I'm sure it will get worse in the coming weeks, not better, and then that's something that we should definitely be afraid of. I'm trying to level up the two characters that I care about as fast as possible, get them ahead of the curve, get them above the regular access, which is going to happen on Tuesday, so I don't have to worry about the lag that will definitely happen. There have been instances of shards not happening correctly on certain servers. I've seen instances where there were 60 plus players on a single shard, new shards not popping up on the planets where they should. Hopefully Bioware gets that wrapped up and in hand before it goes live, because performance is going to be a huge problem. And when players get into their new shiny game, they want to play it and they want it to play okay. And another problem while I'm on this, and this isn't really a bug, this is just a design problem, I think it's poorly implemented, is the fact that all the quests leading up to the big end of the story, if you do all of them, you get to maybe 3/4 to all the way to 59. It doesn't get you all the way to 60 by running the main storyline. You have to basically go back and do dailies. And this is including some dailies. On my character, I played over the course of 5 or 6 days. Today was the day that I got my character up to max level. And I was doing dailies over the course of those days to get the reputation boost from those quests. And I still wasn't able to get above 59 when I hit the last quest, which is a little annoying. And I know my character did not go through the main Forged Alliance's storyline because I had already done them. But if you're going to include that in your calculation for getting players to 60 is they have to do that quest line, well, maybe you should award them special bonus XP for having completed it already and skipping that. I think that would be nice of them to do. I was also doing it with the full complement of XP boosts, so that wasn't the issue there. I think that they've just designed it very poorly, and this is another reason why I think Yavin was half-baked, is that it seems like there should have been another area or two on Yavin to give you experience to get you to that level 60, but nope, it's basically one area just split into 3 sections, kind of, and once you complete those 3 sections, you're done. Very anticlimactic. Another interesting bug situation, maybe, is the fact that players are having to retrain skills that they already had trained up before, and skills, as you know, are expensive in this game. But because Bioware has changed some of the skills and how they work, and when you learn them, players are having to learn them again. And this is now complicated further by the fact that Bioware has said when the official release of Shadow of Revan happens, all skills will be free to train. So players basically get the 12x XP training bonus for when they level up their skills. I'm not personally offended by this. I wish BioWare would have had the foresight to recognize this would be happening. They obviously tested this for how long. They ought to have known that this was going to happen once the game actually released, and players having had the 12 XP and all the free skill ups, they would probably want to continue the free skill ups. But no, they decided to price them very expensively. It costs almost 300k to 500k to level up the skills that you get over the course of the expansion from 55 to 60. You do get a decent amount of money leveling up through Shadow of Revan, definitely enough to cover the cost of all those skills, so I think that's where your 1-to-1 ratio goes, and if you want to spend your money on something else other than skills, that's an option that the player has had. I think it would be nice if BioWare offered some kind of refund or some kind of reward for players who pre-ordered the game, so this is obviously the players who are most dedicated, who are kind of getting quote-unquote screwed by this. But I don't think that BioWare owes us anything. I just hope that BioWare in the future, and I mean I've said this a million times, looks more at their testing and more towards their player base to recognize these problems before they actually happen. Because problems like this with community relations and simple quality of life changes that happen in the game are consistently bugged up or messed up when they go live. So hopefully going forward they recognize that as a problem and work to improve upon it. There have also been a metric, a galactic ton of other smaller bugs. One bug, very nice, probably an exploit, so I don't know if I should be talking about it, but uncertain datacrons? There may possibly be some kind of way in which datacrons can be obtained without having to do the long quest that involves hunting down rare mobs. It seems to be a server issue. It doesn't look like there's anything players can do to replicate it as far as I know. But I do know that once the chest is opened, then anyone is free to go take them. Not telling you how or when it happens, but I've seen it happen. In the end, this expansion is just one in a long line of BioWare releases that are plagued with bugs. I think at this point, we come to expect them and almost forgive them, which is probably a bad thing. I probably should be much harsher on BioWare here, but I feel like we've been in this game for so long that you kind of know this is going to happen. Is that an excuse? Probably not, but I mean, I think at this point you guys know what to expect in these BioWare releases, these SWTOR releases, so I apologize for not railing anymore, but it's kind of hard at this point to get up much anger when I've stuck with SWTOR for this long on the bug front. And then there's a story. I might go into some spoilers here. I'll try to avoid big spoilers, but I mean, the expansion is called Shadow of Revan. Revan's part of the story. Spoiler alert. But other than that, I think the story is done extremely well up until Yavin. Like I said, I think that the story on Rishi is great. The feel of a pirate world, as it is, with all the different factions kind of milling around, is great. I think they do a great job leading you up into the questline, at least on the Republic side. Like I said, I have not done the Imperial side yet. This will all be Republic knowledge, specifically on my Smuggler. I think they do a great job easing you into the story with like a little bit of a mystery before you run back into your old pals, Lana and Theron and Jacairo. So I think they do a good job leading you into that with all the discussions and the weirdness with the pirate, cannibal, pirate, whatevers. I think that's done well. I think the writing is done really well. Like I said, the cutscenes are great. I think the voice actors have really put in a good performance. I know it is very spotty in this game, the voice acting, but I think in this case, and I think that this is helped by the voice acting for other parts really being minimized and reduced down to basically nothing. They could focus on the voice acting of the main players, which is a great thing. And then you get to Yavin, and like I said, spoiler, so if you want to avoid all of this, please skip ahead a little bit. On Yavin, all of a sudden you get there. You've figured out this forged alliance with not Bastila, the other Shan, and the Sith dude. They've come together. They're gonna work together. Great. And then they say, okay, we can do this. Just go do a couple daily quests, and then come back and we'll fight Revan. Cool? Cool. Alright. and then you go do a couple daily quests, you come back, and you fight Revan, and then it's over. It all kind of happens so quickly. You never get to really get immersed in the Yavin 4 storyline. You don't really know why you're there. They kind of allude to why you're on Yavin, but they never explain it super well. Maybe they do in the operations which occur there. But the story of Yavin 4 definitely is half-baked and feels like they didn't have enough time to really flesh it out and get a really epic story conclusion, because Rishi set it up so well, and then Yavin is kind of a letdown. I do like the last fight against Revan in solo mode when it works. Obviously, more bugs there. But I like that fight. I like the fact that all the different characters come together. There's an awesome piece of the cutscene where you basically zoom in on your character surrounded by all the other major players, and they ignite their lightsabers and they unholster their weapons, and it's really cool. I think that's an awesome segment, but I think that it comes too quickly. There's a big reveal surrounding Revan at the end that feels like it doesn't get enough screen time. It doesn't get explained well enough, and then it kind of just ends. And it ends on another cliffhanger, kind of like the Voyage Alliance's storyline did, which I know they kind of have to do. They can't give you all the story all at once. They have to write more of it, they have to record more of it, they have to do the cutscenes and the content for it. But it does kind of suck that at the end of every story now, it's going to be like, okay, we've completed this, we've done something great, now go do nothing for a little while, and we'll call you again when this is important. Even though at the end of this storyline, there's a major reveal that will shape how this expansion goes, and it seems like it's going to be a very imminent threat, and they're like, don't worry about it, we'll call you again later. But that might just be a limitation of how the MMO has to work, how the game has to work. They can only do so much at one time. And then there's the single story quests that you do for your class mission, which I may spoil the entire thing here, just so I can talk about it, which feel really just thrown in, but they could have been so much more. They could have been great. I really enjoyed doing the little story mission. This one, again, spoilers here, this one is with Beryl Thorn from earlier in the storyline. You've met her. She was a side player in the smuggler storyline. She pops back up. She wants you to do a task for her. You're going to work together to do some smuggling, which is cool. I think the story is very fitting of the smuggler. I don't know how the other stories fit in with their character classes, but I think it feels very smugglery what you're doing. But I feel like it's very similar to Yavin, where it kind of comes and goes. You go to Yavin, a bunch of stuff happens, and then you're done. And with this storyline, you go to Beryl, you do what she wants you to do, and you come back, and that's it. There's no ramifications. You don't feel like you've really accomplished anything. It just feels like story for story's sake. I think they could have done a great job if they could have expanded it just a little bit and cut it up into pieces that happen throughout the storyline. Because right now, how it happens is kind of in the transition between Rishi and Yavin is when you get that quest. Or actually, no, it's in the lead up to the first solo flashpoint. You get the class quest. And you go do that, and then it's over. I feel like it should have been split up in such a way where you do one little small thing. So Beryl calls you up. Beryl calls you up and says, hey, we want to do this smuggling mission. Do you remember me? Let's meet here. So you go meet her, and she says, I've gathered info, and I need you to go pick this up here. So you go pick that up. You bring it back to her. Okay, I have to go talk to this person. Talk to that person. And I'm going to spoil fully the smuggler storyline here. So again, if you don't want to know anything about the smuggler quest, don't listen to this segment. But in the smuggler quest, you are going to get tickets for a special pleasure barge for a hut. And this hut is escaping the galaxy for 10 years, going out to unknown space, and then coming back after all of this fighting stuff blows over. And Beryl wants to get tickets for this and sell them to some people for a huge profit, and she wants you to help her out. So you go help her out, you go find the tickets, you come back to her, and you find out that the tickets that you had stolen are strictly for non-humanoid species to join the pleasure barge, so you guys can't use them, which was part of the plan, was you guys would escape too if things got too bad. So instead, she just sells them, and then she leaves, and that's it. I feel like it could have worked better where it's like, okay, go get the tickets. Part one of the storyline, you get it where you get it. Go get the tickets. Okay. You go get the tickets, you bring them back to her, great. Part two of the quest could have been oh no, these tickets, they are only for non-humanoids. Go see this person who maybe will be able to trade these non-humanoid tickets for humanoid tickets, and we can use some of them and sell the rest. So you go do that, you come back to her with the humanoid tickets, then you come back to a third part of the storyline, and it's like, oh no, these tickets, they're fake, we can't use these either, but maybe we can sell them. And the player character makes a deal where you can trade these fake tickets for some information about Revan to someone, because I think that would work. If it's somehow tied, right now it feels so segregated from the main storyline. You can feel that, oh, we can't put class story into the regular story, so we're just going to make these wholly separate things. If they could tie that more into the story at large, I think that would make it more interesting. And I think that would make it more satisfying as well. Right now, when you complete that quest line, it's like, okay, I talked to that character who was in the storyline. It feels like a cameo, like, hey, you remember this person? That person's gone. And if they had instead tied it more into the storyline, it would have felt more like class story instead of a throwaway class quest. But overall, I think the story was serviceable. I was happy with it, even though it was lacking in certain areas. And I'm really excited to see where they go in the future, and I can't wait to get into the operations to see where the storyline goes in those. Shadows of Revan is a very interesting expansion. There's so much to talk about. I obviously can't cover it all in one episode, so we'll be talking about Shadows of Revan for a long time coming, I'm sure. So if I didn't talk about something you want me to talk about, we can discuss it in a later episode. All you have to do is email me at gaddockteague@gaddockgaming.com if you have a topic you want me to cover on the show. And if it's about Shadows of Revan, I'll definitely include it on a future episode. And with that, it's time for the Wall of Crazy.
What? That's impossible, even for a computer. It's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
In this week's Wall of Crazy topic, I asked you on Twitter what was the best part of Shadow of Revan Early Access. I got several responses to this one, and let's start with Madmar at SWTOR Family. And he says, rating new content. It has been a long time since PvEers have got any new substantial 8-player content and 16-player content. I'm excited to get into these new raids, and I can't wait until I'm able to. Next up, who, at DaveO_NewWaveO, says, SOR story presentation is great. Story is Bioware's strong suit. Together with its best IP around, more please. I may not be as high on the story as you, although I think the Rishi story is definitely can be put up there with some of the best Bioware storytelling out there. But players definitely love their story, and let's get more story into the game. Next up, Spencer at The Dirty Spoon says, a jumpstart on crafting and crew skills. And this is similar to Nathan K's response at NepthanORD, who says, getting a head start on the GTN with all the new recipes. And I agree, getting in on the early access to these new recipes has definitely been a boon to my pocket. And I'm sure Nepthan and Spencer have also felt this increased cash flow from being able to get in early. And then finally, Bad Feeling Podcast says 12 times XP. I don't think they understood the question, but that's fine, because the Bad Feeling Podcast doesn't need to understand the question. They have all the answers. And I think that about does it for this week's show. As always, if you'd like to contact me, you can send your questions, comments, concerns to gaddockteague@gaddockgaming.com, or you can tweet them to @gteague on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes to get your weekly podcast updates, and if you're new to the game or thinking of resubscribing, I provided my refer friend link in the show notes, so if you'd like a little added incentive to come back, feel free to use it. You can also check out my website, gaddockgaming.com, where I post the podcast, blogs, and any other gaming musings that I would like to get on the internet. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast. This is JD, signing off.